Today, we're going to start by looking at the concept of volunteer tourism and look at both its potential to create good outcomes in tourist destinations and also to create meaningful experiences for the tourists who participate. And we're also going to look at the pitfalls of volunteer tourism, which can be seen as a form of exploitation in tourist destinations if it is not managed effectively. What we're looking at in this image is a social media account created by a couple of young American girls who were volunteer tourists in Africa and came across a particular type of volunteer tourist who was really only undertaking volunteer tourism to get an impressive social media profile picture. And so they started this satirical account called Barbie's Saviour, which highlights this idea, which is quite prevalent among many American young people, that they should travel to less developed parts of the world and do their best to save everybody there, and that they can make a really meaningful difference, even though they go with very little training or very few skills that are going to be useful in those destinations. And this account, Barbie's Saviour, an Instagram account, has been very cutting in pointing out why these types of volunteer tourism experiences are not necessarily great outcomes for the people of tourist destinations. Despite the pitfalls, volunteer tourism is currently booming. At least 1.6 million people every year are spending more than $2 billion integrating volunteering components into their tourism experiences. They are seeking authentic interactions with local communities and a sense that they are making a difference. And this sentiment is known to be extremely appealing to the millennial generation. They want to feel that they are making a difference in the world, and these volunteer tourism experiences can provide that if they are handled and managed well.
As you pack up the family this summer and head out on vacation, how would you and your kids feel about arriving at your sunny destination and getting right to work? Morgan Radford looks into the booming business of voluntourism and some of the questions around it.
Bathing in the sunlight, dancing on the deck, and cocktails by the pool. That's what you think of when you think of a Caribbean cruise vacation. Not this. These vacationers are digging a little deeper. They're part of a growing trend called voluntourism, volunteering plus tourism.
More than just saying I went and sat on a beach and got a tan and got drunk for a week. Now I'm actually making a difference.
1.6 million people make a difference like this each year, and that fact has now caught the attention of some big names in the hospitality industry, including Carnival, Sandals Resorts, and even the Ritz-Carlton.
I got it.
Where in Key Biscayne, Florida, that means helping save sea turtles.
Here, hold your hand out.
Guests help out by painting stakes to mark the endangered sea turtles' nests.
We got to hold them and play with them, and we even saw them walk out to the ocean, which was really cool.
Sandals Resort in Jamaica is jumping in too, offering guests the chance to volunteer at local schools. Since 2009, more than 17,000 volunteers have taken part in their reading road trip.
It did sticky up my hand when they see somebody coming, taking time for their vacation, and a person who they would probably never have interacted with before. Chances of these kids seeing a tourist are 1 in 10. So the fact that they're taking their time to come in their environment, in their classrooms, and spend the time with them, is awesome.
You're looking for
attracting couples like Tim and Miranda Taylor.
I like working with children and things like that, so he surprised me and booked this for us for our honeymoon.
Good morning.
Seeing Miranda actually interact with the kids, it made me cherish those qualities in her, and it's something that you don't see in our generation.
Even cruise giant Carnival is setting sail on the idea, designing a specialty cruise liner for what they call impact travelers.
It's millennials who tend to think kind of globally first, and how do I make a difference? But it's also people who've traveled a lot, and they say, you know what, next time I travel, I'd like to do something a little different and make a difference.
For $4.99, passengers can choose to do service activities in the Dominican Republic.
Now, what I want to go into.
On board, they spend 2 days taking classes and learning about the home country before they arrive. Once they dock, 3 days volunteering in some of the country's most challenged neighborhoods. Travelers can teach English at local schools. Or in people's homes.
Así que practica conmigo. What is your name?
My name is Saran.
Oh, my name is Morgan. Thank you for asking. Nice to meet you, Randy.
For the more hardcore volunteers like 78-year-old Joanne, they can build cement floors in low-income neighborhoods or barrios.
This is so hands-on, and you're so, directly in touch with the people that it's really quite remarkable.
Joanne, my hat and my gloves are off to you.
Well, I can't take my gloves off.
Some say it's as much about learning as it is about teaching.
Do you feel like you're making a difference?
Definitely, because the conditions, it's really bad, and like the dirt floors, there's diseases and mud when it's raining, and yeah, it really makes a difference.
But critics say that's precisely the problem with voluntourism. It helps the volunteers more than the locals.
One of the challenges is people want the cultural experience of direct contact with individuals, and it's hard to imagine that being really effective on a short-term basis. It's hard enough to be effective on a long-term basis when you're in the country, even if you know the language, even if you've studied the culture.
But the locals we spoke to, like the women who run this small recycled paper factory supported by Carnival volunteers, say it's changed their lives.
¿Cómo se sienten ustedes cuando están trabajando acá?
Carnival says they've made a real impact, a success in part due to local partnerships.
Me, myself, being from Puerto Plata and living here, we really want this to happen. We want it to work. If it works, and it is right now, it can be replicated somewhere else in the world, and that's the goal.
A goal to change travel and the way each of us sees the world.
So what are the benefits of volunteer tourism, or voluntourism as it is sometimes called as well? For travellers, these can include living on site with the host community, so growing to understand what life is like in host communities and broadening the traveller's outlook and understanding of the world, getting to work alongside local people similarly provides an understanding of what life is like in that context. Getting to play with locals leads to more authentic interactions than you can get from just being a tourist who is really only having the interaction as a guest where local people are serving them. To work and play alongside local people opens the door to a whole new realm of authenticity of interaction between individuals. Physical work is known to be particularly rewarding for people, but particularly people who don't normally undertake physical work. Visiting special places that local people are aware of. When you travel as a tourist, often you only have access to sites that are known tourist attractions, and there will be a tourism infrastructure laid out there. When you travel as a volunteer tourist and you have these authentic interactions with local people and become genuine friends with local people, they can show you to places which tourists normally would never have the chance to encounter. You can learn about a local culture through interaction with that culture rather than simply reading about it or being informed about that culture by mediators of the tourism industry. So these may be tour guides who are telling you about a culture. Rather than being told about it, you are interacting with it in an authentic way. And this is quite a meaningful tourist experience. There is a good feeling that comes from others less fortunate than yourself. But this points towards some of the pitfalls of volunteer tourism that we will explore in a little more detail later on. When the traveller is engaged in volunteer tourism solely for the feeling that it brings to themselves, you run the risk of becoming a bit like Saviour Barbie, who's traveling to less developed countries simply to feel good about herself and how fortunate she is in her own setting. So what are the benefits of volunteer tourism for hosts? Well, some of the benefits are those which are tangible and pretty obvious to see. The work that volunteers are performing in their communities. Now, there are dangers here if volunteer tourism is not managed well, that volunteers can actually be taking paid work away from local people. Children and other members of the host community can learn the language of the guest and can learn other lessons from the culture of the guest. Hosts can also learn about the guest's culture, and this is going to contribute to their global awareness and their understanding of different cultures around the world, in the same way that travelers get these benefits from learning about the host culture. The fees from volunteer tourism can support local staff, and this is important in creating employment locally. Local communities benefit from the expenditure of volunteer tourists in that local community as well. Not only the fees that they are paying to be a volunteer tourist, but also their purchases of food and services throughout their stay will go directly to local businesses. And this is a real benefit for local communities. So when it's operating at its best, volunteer tourism can promote global stewardship and peace through this cross-cultural understanding and breaking down these barriers of misunderstanding between different peoples. Volunteer tourism opens the door for travel and tourism to be forces for good and positive change in local destinations that we really haven't considered before this concept came into being. The unique travel experiences that volunteer tourism can provide can promote the conservation of remarkable landscapes. It can promote intimate and respectful relationships between people of vastly different cultures inhabiting vastly different geographies. And these can be really important in the sense of promoting global stewardship and peace. And so we've really highlighted the potentials of volunteer tourism for both the traveller and also for host communities. But of course, there are also pitfalls wound up in this particular form of tourism and the cross-cultural interactions that take place. In our next lecture, we'll focus a little more on these pitfalls and then finally explore what becoming a volunteer tourist might look like for you.